Let me first get something out of the way. This video is not going to be a takedown or demolition of Dave Rubin. Ideally, Dave Rubin could watch this video himself and understand a carefully constructed critique when he sees it, but in the land of the internet that might be asking for far too much. Dave Rubin began his career as a bushy-tailed comedian performing in New York City. His early career had him immediately touching on the world of political comedy when he interned at The Daily Show. Rubin displayed some affinity towards creating his own platforms by starting The Anti-Show, a short-lived comedy program filmed at NBC Studios that aired on Manhattan Neighborhood Network in the fall of 2001. It was basically a Daily Show ripoff that never really got off the ground. Speaking of not getting off the ground, Rubin also started 2 different comedy clubs in New York City in the mid-2000s. The first, Joe Franklin's Comedy Club, closed sometime after 2009. I couldn't quite find the exact date on that one. And the second club, I couldn't really find any information at all. The comedy company closed down, but its former address is now occupied by a TGI Fridays, so at least it went out with a laugh. Rubin went on to start several podcasts, including Hot Gay Comics and The Ben and Dave Show, both of which ended up being TV shows on the Here network. But it was Rubin's The Six Pack, which was eventually picked up by Sirius, that became a big hit. Rubin gave up the podcasting world and eventually moved to Los Angeles, where he began working at the progressive YouTube channel The Young Turks. And so the Rubin Report was born. However, this was a far cry from the show we know of today. It consisted of short clips touching on news stories of the day, with Rubin's brand of humor thrown in. Rubin also made the occasional appearance on cable news programs such as The O'Reilly Factor. Here he is, briefly commenting on what would later be a major cause for him.
On the base of this, I believe in free speech, and I believe that Dan Cathy is welcome to say what he wants. Okay. And I believe that the gay community at the same point is welcome to say what they want.
Rubin eventually broke with the Young Turks during what he would later refer to as his awakening. It began in October of 2014 when Rubin saw the infamous confrontation between Sam Harris and Batman on Real Time with Bill Maher, where some noise was made after Sam Harris called Islam
is the motherlode of bad ideas.
Jesus.
So we have
some heated words were exchanged, and a wide-eyed Dave Rubin was sent on a voyage of self-discovery. It was a voyage that he was on with a lot of other people who were regular viewers of Rubin's current employer, the Young Turks. Shortly after the real-time confrontation, Sam Harris sat down with Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks for a 3-hour discussion. Although the discussion was less a debate and more an exercise in masochism, Rubin, and many of the viewers, felt some affinity with Harris's exasperation with the left. Rubin felt that exasperation so strongly that he decided to break from the Young Turks and immediately take the Rubin Report into his own hands. And by immediately into his own hands, I mean taking a job with Riot 5 months later.
But I figured out what my voice was here.
Thank you.
Even the times that we challenged each other, like, it was great. It was always great, and I hope we continue to do that. And I hope you'll come on my show at Riot, and I hope I'm welcome back here. And
no, you're done. Let's just be honest.
That's it.
Although recently, most of TYT's audience tends to generally enjoy the content they put out, there was a period around 2014 and 2015 where whenever there was any mention of Islam or a few other hot-button topics in one of their videos, there would be an intense negative reaction. Here's an illustrative comment. A significant segment of TYT's audience had strongly held beliefs about Islam, feminism, and race, and they strongly disagreed with TYT's coverage of those issues. This resentment towards discussion centered on identity politics was creating a growing sense of outrage from those who thought the accusations of racism and sexism were getting out of hand. This anger was coalescing into a general anti-left sentiment and can be seen in comments like the ones on screen. The mere mention of terms like racism and sexism were enough to trigger an outrage. While I don't speak to the personal motivations of those who share this anger, it is one that can be found quite easily throughout YouTube, particularly in circles that disseminate videos in which there is much gnashing of teeth about the SJW menace. Rubin's YouTube career up to this point had mostly been mixed. His videos while working under the Young Turks varied widely in their results. Some struggled to crack 10,000 viewers while others reached millions. His time at Riot gave him some consistency, but in the wrong direction, with most videos struggling to break that 10,000 view barrier. Much of the content of this time followed Rubin's earlier formula of commenting on news of the day.
Yes, robots are coming to destroy this, and that's why I do it, so that years from now, on a cracked TV screen in a room, after the robotic overtake, you'll see this, and people go, oh, he knew what he was saying.
But being his own version of what a channel like TOIT was already doing wasn't cutting it, so Rubin made another change. Rubin's time with Riot came to an end when Rubin made the move to Larry King's Aura TV in September of 2015. With this came a format change from brief commentary clips to long one-on-one interviews. Rubin's first major interview just happened to be with the man who inspired his awakening, Sam Harris. The Rubin Report we know of today was born during that interview with Harris, as Rubin not only found a format he enjoyed, but he also found a particular audience, one that would shape his show in the years to come. Rubin began his new format by immediately addressing his audience with a series of rules. You can see them on screen, and by and large, they're pretty straightforward for a left-leaning YouTube personality. I say left-leaning because that's how Rubin describes himself at this point.
Is seeing my side, the people on the left, cherry-picking facts, stifling debate, and labeling everyone they disagree with a racist, a bigot, a homophobe, or worse.
From here we can see Rubin had some ideas of how his show was going to go down. He was presenting himself not just as a person on the left though, but rather someone disaffected with the left. By choosing Sam Harris as his first interview subject, he was courting the same faction on the left that's dissatisfied with the content on channels like the Young Turks, particularly its commentary on social issues. One of the big promises early on in the Rubin Report was to speak with people from across the political spectrum. Rubin wanted to prove his earnestness in exploring ideas by inviting a wide range of opinions, and this is evidenced by many of his earliest guests, including the likes of Don Lemon, Larry Elder, Jimmy Dore, and Douglas Murray. But it was one guest in particular that really resonated with Rubin's new audience, and that was Milo Yiannopoulos. For those who may not remember, Milo Yiannopoulos was a writer for the right-wing media outlet Breitbart, and he shot to fame championing the Gamergate controversy. After outraging activists on the left for a few years, he fell from grace after some old comments of him came out that sound an awful lot like him defending pedophilia. Now he sells dick pills on crackpot outlet InfoWars. While the Harris interview did well a few months earlier, ratcheting up nearly 1 million views at the time of writing this, it was several small clips with Yiannopoulos that really excited the viewership of Rubin's channel. All three of these videos did extremely well, with a combined total of nearly 5 million views, and leading to a spike in subscriptions and views for Rubin's channel in October of 2015. I need to talk about Dave Rubin's interview style for a moment. Rubin describes his own style in one of his early videos.
I talked to Mike Huckabee's campaign manager about gay marriage, and she basically just danced around it. Had I pushed her to the breaking point, I probably would have never gotten access to her again, and then word would have traveled fast that I'm someone that they shouldn't talk to. So with that in mind, I tried my best to navigate all the interviews with some basic questions and then some deeper probing.
And this will be a theme in many of his interviews in the future. His approach is so gentle, so concerned with offending his guest, that he would sooner let his guests walk all over him and use his show as a convenient platform rather than strongly counter their arguments. And that's precisely what Milo Yiannopoulos did. In 2015, Yiannopoulos was a darling of the alt-right and Gamergate crowds, and the gentle interview Rubin had with him pleased Yiannopoulos' fans so much that many of them decided to stick around. While some might argue the interview helped put Yiannopoulos on the map, I would sooner say that it helped put the new Rubin Report on the map with a particular audience. Rubin had the audience of disaffected leftists, but Yiannopoulos brought with him a bunch of people from the extreme right who came to see someone on the left play second banana to their idol. It wouldn't be the last time Rubin found himself in this position. It should also be noted that Yiannopoulos was a guest that was recommended to Rubin by his audience beforehand, and as already evidenced, the disaffected left that was Rubin's new base enjoyed hearing the likes of Yiannopoulos complain about the SJWs. Rubin's initial audience were curious about this anti-left rhetoric coming from the right, and while they may have seen themselves as either on the left or center, they were willing to put any disagreements on hold to enjoy a good bashing of those on the left they disliked. And in time, the lines between these audiences would only get blurrier. The booking of Yiannopoulos was a small step in what Rubin was trying to do with his show. He was hoping to engineer an audience that was not only enjoying his content, but also engaged online. There are numerous examples of Rubin encouraging his viewers to become more engaged on Twitter and to call out misdeeds wherever they saw them, essentially turning his audience into a group of online activists.
That the discussions we're having here on the show, as well as the ones that you guys are having on Twitter and YouTube, are actually making a difference. That's the beauty of the internet. You can get issues to actually bubble up until mainstream takes notice. There's evidence of the awakening that I've been talking about all over the place right now. The point of all this is that every week, actually every day that I've been doing this show, I see this movement getting stronger. You guys are not only connecting with me, but with each other. And now when I see the usual regressives spout off their nonsense, there's an army of people calling them out on it. That is literally as important as anything that I do.
In return, Rubin took booking suggestions and reading advice from his audience. He wasn't so much the leader of a movement as he was a part of it. The next indicator of the state of the Rubin Report audience was its reaction to his interview with civil rights attorney Areva Martin in January of 2016. To date, it is by far his least popular interview, with the full interview and clipped sections not getting close to 100,000 views. As an unambiguous voice from the left, the Rubin Report's audience decided Martin's perspective wasn't a part of the battle of ideas that interested them. Of the few that watched the Martin interview, the reaction was fierce. A large number of dislikes and comments like this one. In fact, of all of Rubin's full-length feature interviews, this is the only one where the dislikes outnumber the likes. I don't suspect this is because of Rubin's performance. Although Rubin trumpeted his platform as a place for voices from across the political spectrum, it appeared as though the Rubin Report's audience was less interested in voices like Martin and more interested in voices from the right, like Yiannopoulos. The next few months brought with it feature interviews with Tommy Robinson, Mike Cernovich, Milo Yiannopoulos again, and perhaps most notably, Ben Shapiro. Shapiro, editor for the conservative outlet The Daily Wire, is a fairly prominent conservative voice who is best known for challenging teenagers on Twitter and breaking them on the wheel of logic. A little under a year after having him on his show, Dave Rubin would cite Ben Shapiro, along with earlier guests Sam Harris and Larry Elder, along with future guest Eric Weinstein, as trusted guides to the world of politics. Even more telling is that interviews with Harris, Elder, and Shapiro go on to be the most popular on the channel. Rubin's tastes and his audiences were beginning to align. I want to look at this comment under the first Shapiro interview from Alex Jones. Wait, that can't be right. Oh, well, damn, maybe it is Alex Jones, shit. Rubin's style is lauded here as presenting ideas an audience might not be comfortable with, along with some self-congratulations for being willing to listen to them. This charity and open-mindedness is something that often accompanies many of the interviews Rubin has with right-wing guests. The same level of charity never seems to meet the left-wing guests. They're more likely to meet the fate of Areva Martin, either being ignored or fiercely disagreed with. The Rubin Report is becoming a place welcoming to voices from the right, while shunning voices from the left. But before leaving Season 1 entirely, there are two curious direct messages I want to point out first. The real threat of a Donald Trump presidency and how to stop Trump. Of all of Dave Rubin's direct messages, these two have the worst like-to-dislike ratio. Aside from Hillary Clinton is the Democratic presidential nominee from later in the year. Gee, I wonder why that one got so much hate. The Trump videos feature Dave opining the divisiveness in politics, and he takes the time to criticize the left for the rise of Trump. Why he doesn't blame the right for the rise of the regressives is a mystery. In spite of the name of the video, Rubin only offers a mild criticism of Trump, instead falling back on a common talking point of the time of Trump being some kind of unknowable wild card. Rubin's advice to stop Trump is less about what to do to stop him and more about what not to do if you want to stop him. In other words, his advice for stopping Trump is to admonish the left for behaving badly. This encapsulates what his channel is often about and what binds the Rubin Report's audience together: anger towards the left. Rubin in these videos has demonstrated either consciously or unconsciously that he knows how to tap into that audience, and that makes all commentary either explicitly or partially anti-left. Or at this point in the Rubin Report, it would still be considered anti-regressive. The distinction between regressive and left wouldn't fade until sometime later. To complete his critical look at Trump, Rubin's guests following these two direct messages were Mike Cernovich, a Trump operative, and Milo Yiannopoulos. He had famously called Trump his daddy. This comment from a Dale Gribble alias under How to Stop Trump sums up a significant portion of the Rubin Report's audience. Trump is the anti-left candidate they have all been waiting for. This was the state of affairs of the Rubin Report heading into the relaunch of the show in June of 2016. The project had bare fruit for Rubin, and he was getting ready to take it to the next level. At what can be thought of as Season 2 of the Rubin Report, some major changes happened behind the scenes. Rubin left Aura TV when they decided to move away from YouTube as a platform for its videos, and Rubin felt like he needed to be loyal to the audience on YouTube he had helped build. Rubin moved the show from the Aura studios to his own home. Now Rubin was faced with a new challenge. He had to finance the whole thing. Enter every YouTuber's favorite crowdfunding platform, Patreon. As a side note, the Rubin Report's Patreon was actually started in November of 2015, over half a year earlier. It only had about a few dozen supporters back then, though. It didn't really pick up any momentum until this Season 2 push in July of 2016, where Rubin asked the Rubin Report audience to dig deep. And dig deep they did, with the number of backers jumping up to 2,354, and Rubin earning $21,402 a month. The audience who had shaped the Rubin Report had bought in. Dave Rubin had often equated what he did on the show as being just as important as the activism of the audience. He lavished them with praise for their activity on social media, and sometimes jumped into the middle of Twitter fights himself. Assuming you haven't had an intense hypnotherapy session to block this out of your memory, you probably remember there was an election in the fall of 2016. Shortly after Rubin returned from his break, Hillary Clinton was declared the nominee for the Democratic Party, and this direct message is easily his least popular. It can't really be compared to any direct message he put together for Trump's nomination, though, as he never made one of those. But the comments from the Rubin Report's audience make it quite clear who they prefer in this upcoming race. To cap it off, Rubin's guest following this direct message was none other than Clinton critic and felon Dinesh D'Souza. The second DM I want to talk about is Rubin's discussion of the alt-right. Although he doesn't identify with the group himself, he largely excuses their actions as antics by ironic Nazis. Rubin is very gentle with his criticism of the alt-right, noting that while real racists and Nazis exist in their ranks,
what the alt-right really is, though, is a band of meme posters, anime avatars, and Twitter eggs vying for attention from people in power. They post Nazi memes, racist pictures, and offensive tweets with the express intent of getting powerful people to react or respond and thus amplify their message. They are keyboard warriors and professional trolls trying to get attention from the sold-out and corrupt media and political elite that we have. Some true racists mixed with a bunch of people who just want to mess with those in power. How many of each of them are there? We have no idea. What we do know, though, is that these people wield very little real-world power.
he doesn't see the group as completely despicable, and for good measure he blames Hillary Clinton for their rise. In this instance, though, he doesn't try to take the middle route, balancing right and left. He explicitly says he believes the alt-right is better than the regressive left, and he believes this to be true because of how he's been informed by the Rubin Report audience.
Personally, I think that the regressive left is more of a threat to our democracy than the alt-right. The regressive left, with its tactics of stifling debate and silencing critics, has gained mainstream traction in our media and in our universities. These regressive, not progressive ideas have become all too common on the left, and they've actually given birth to the natural response, the alt-right. I know this firsthand, not only from the emails that you guys send me, but also from all the students at UCLA who came up to me after my event with Milo Yiannopoulos a couple months ago to tell me that they're supporting Trump just because they can't take the culture of fear around speech anymore.
In the eye of this storm still exist some people in the Rubin Report audience who don't share these increasingly anti-left views and no trouble when they see it. A few comments like these pop up on Rubin's videos expressing dismay and concern, but they become less common as the months drag on. Rubin gives up on being completely independent as he announces a partnership with Learn Liberty. Learn Liberty is a project by the Institute for Humane Studies, which is notably funded by billionaire Charles Koch, who is by far its biggest contributor, having from 1999 to 2014 donated $14,963,318. IHS, and by extension Learn Liberty, have been pushing forward a libertarian message across a number of projects over the years, frequently from a right-wing perspective. Their partnership with the Rubin Report is doing much of the same. Although Dave Rubin, as far as I've been able to discover, has never gone into the specifics of what his partnership with Learn Liberty entails, we know at least one part of this deal includes having guests selected by Learn Liberty appear on the Rubin Report. This has, in effect, given Learn Liberty some editorial control over the show. Much like ceding control to the audience, this is another example of Rubin bargaining away control over the show that bears his name. Now, I don't point this out as a direct criticism, but would rather refer back to Rubin's stated goals in starting this show. He expressed a desire to speak to people from across the political spectrum, and he's given significant control over the booking of his show to his audience, which has a strong anti-left bias, and Learn Liberty, whose libertarian perspective often put it at odds with the left. If Rubin wants balance on his show, that is, exploring ideas from across the spectrum, it's at this point he should be wondering where voices from the left will be coming from. And it's from here that the election kicks into high gear and we get a barrage of election-themed content. Rubin's commentary about the election, as is usual for him, takes the center route, advocating for a non-specific diversity of voices. He interviews transhumanist candidate Zoltan Istvan. The audience is less interested in this interview or most of the alternative voices that don't support an anti-left stance. The Istvan interview netted less than 100,000 views across all 4 clips, whereas, at roughly the same time, the Rubin Report lapped up an interview with filmmaker Cassie J about her sympathetic look at men's rights activism. In the interest of presenting some concerns from the Rubin Report channel, though, regarding its view count, I should point out to this comment where it's suspected or hypothesized by the Rubin Report that view counts aren't being accurately reported by YouTube and people are being unsubscribed from the channel. This is one of many claims that have come from Dave Rubin over the years about YouTube interfering with his channel, often based on hearsay or random comments from his audience. I would love to dive into this YouTube conspiracy, but that will have to be a topic for another day. Rubin's audience continued to make its feelings clear as the 2016 election continued. In an interview of October of 2016 with scientist and secular activist Lawrence Krauss, a slightly unfavorably received section criticizing Trump includes this comment. It illustrates so very clearly what matters more to the Rubin Report audience, whether Clinton or Trump will be more sensitive to the concerns of, from their perspective, the SJW menace. That's why they would sooner watch a video about a female filmmaker being red-pilled over a discussion of alternative candidates, or even the alternative candidates themselves. Rubin had on a pro-Clinton guest in Hillary Rosen, and the response from the audience was predictable. A comment like this, while seeming to represent the thirst for diversity within the Rubin Report audience, is betrayed by the complete disinterest of the majority of the actual audience. Much like the voices in the audience asking for more left-leaning guests, this one is a minority within an increasingly anti-left group. As a brief exception, with some people on the left, such as David Sirota, the Rubin Report audience can be quite kind if that person is on to criticize the left. So what matters most is not if the guests are right or left-wing, but will at least pay lip service to anti-left rhetoric. This all translates to an audience that was overwhelmingly pro-Trump, a candidate who unabashedly appealed to the American right and was seen as taking on those bastards on the left. Well, from his perspective. After the election of Donald Trump, Dave Rubin was quick to issue a direct message titled, "Don't freak out about Donald Trump." This direct message includes Rubin calling Trump's election,
"This was a win for us, right? Because if you think about it, the elite, the media, everybody, the establishment all wanted one thing to happen. And what happened? The people actually used their voting power to stop that very thing from happening. That's actually beautiful. I think he's gonna have to govern really from the center, and I think that will be really good for classical liberals, basic liberal people. I think it'll be really good for mainstream conservatives, and then maybe the people that are on the fringes of all of this thing will so slowly be silenced. That's my suspicion at the moment, and maybe I have a slight sense of what I'm talking about because I kind of saw this whole thing unfolding the way it did.
Although the prediction has fallen on its face, the win comment in particular is interesting as it perfectly describes what much of the Rubin Report audience celebrates in Trump, and that's a win against the SJW crowd, who at this point are being conflated with the left in general. When Dave Rubin describes the Democratic Party as being
The identity politics-driven Democratic Party?
after nominating Hillary Clinton, a woman who has very little support in more progressive circles, it shows how anti-regressive has really shifted to just being anti-left, and it shows how Rubin's perspective has shifted quite a bit to the right. With Rubin's perspective being informed by his audience, it's safe to assume that they're all on the same page. This is also the direct message where Rubin infamously mentions holding Trump's feet to the fire.
Trump does something wrong, does something illegal, immoral, any of that, I will be the first to hold his feet to the fire. I hope.
Yeah, another one that didn't age too well. This direct message also preceded what would become the Rubin Report's highest-rated full-length feature interview, Rubin's discussion with Jordan Peterson. This interview I really only mention because it's one of our earliest instances of Peterson crying over a children's cartoon.
Most of your viewers will have watched Pinocchio.
Probably.
There's a scene in Pinocchio where Geppetto wishes on a star, right? And what it means is he lifts up his eyes beyond the horizon to something transcendent, to something ultimate, because that's what a star is. It's part of the eternity of the night sky. And so he lifts his eyes up above his daily concerns and he says, what I want more than anything else is that my creation will become a genuine individual.
A phrase Rubin has been using a lot at this point, referring to people he speaks with, is,
And whether I agreed with them or not,
it doesn't matter whether Rubin agrees with his guests or not. Rubin's views have become far less important to this discussion and far less important to this show. The Rubin Report has always been a platform for Rubin's guests to deliver their views without a serious challenge or debate. And when that platform is being heavily influenced by an anti-left audience and libertarian advocacy group, it's going to privilege certain viewpoints over others. Although Rubin frequently talks about a new center, and he's been doing this since as early as the end of 2015, having borrowed the phrase from a former guest, Ali Rizvi, the term really comes into prominence here as he ties it to the Trump presidency and the guests on his show. If his show is, in essence, the center, why is it skewing so heavily in favor to guests from the right? In 2017, big things started happening with the Rubin Report. An interview with conservative commentator Dennis Prager in January did especially well, and was followed a few weeks later by Dave Rubin essentially announcing what many had already suspected, that he was no longer a member of the left. His Why I Left the Left video for PragerU, which I should mention is not a real university, was widely disseminated, and as of this writing, it's sitting slightly under 6.5 million views. To date, it's one of the most popular on the PragerU channel, ranking right up there with videos such as The War on Boys and Don't Follow Your Passion. Really inspiring stuff. The momentum built through early 2017 with big subscriber and Patreon jumps in the first 5 months of the year. The big draws and interviews were former Fox News personality Glenn Beck, conservative commentator Larry Elder, and failed Canadian asylum seeker Lauren Southern. It was also when the free speech wars broke out. A time of great suffering and hardship for all. But perhaps most remembered for its great victories, immortalized by Dave Rubin in his direct message, Huge Win in the Battle of Ideas. In March of 2017, video commentator Colin Moriarty, who had recently appeared on the Rubin Report as a guest, made a hackneyed joke on Twitter. In Moriarty's estimation, he was then the victim of a concentrated attack from opportunists in the gaming press. There's plenty of discussions on this on how accurate that assessment is on the internet, but the controversy led to Moriarty starting a Patreon that netted him $40,000 a month when it opened, although it's dropped considerably since. Moriarty is only worth mentioning because of how he relates to the Rubin Report. Rubin brought him on for a live discussion following the tweet, where they answered questions to the tune of super chats, and the Moriarty story led to, according to Rubin himself, a jump of nearly $2,000 a month in the Rubin Report's Patreon support. The direct message declaring the huge win in the Battle of Ideas encapsulates much of what makes the Rubin Report's audience tick. It's a victory parade of sorts, where victory is measured in Patreon dollars and Moriarty is championed as a martyr, although instead of 40 virgins, he got 40 grand in Patreon dollars. Support for Moriarty is best understood as him being a new hero for the audience. Much like Rubin, he took a stand against the SJWs, the left, the regressives, or whatever pejorative label that animates the Rubin Report audience. And so long as Rubin and people like Moriarty make similar sounds, the audience is ready to reward them. The next few months, leading to the end of what Rubin colorfully referred to as Season 2 of the Rubin Report, reintroduced an ambivalence to current affairs outside of stories like the Moriarty one. While the first half of 2017 wasn't devoid of news stories in the world, Rubin seemed less curious in holding Trump's feet to the fire and more concerned with stories surrounding Ann Coulter being deplatformed and Bill Maher using a racial slur. If the first year of the Rubin Report was about finding his audience, the second was about the audience finding its host, as the anti-left sentiment cemented in Dave Rubin himself, and the audience had the conservative-friendly voice wrapped in a left-wing package they were looking for. In a discussion with Dennis Prager, it was summed up quite nicely here.
I want you to continue to say you're a liberal because you're of great use to good values.
Well, don't worry, I'm not doing it for your use of me. I'm doing it for myself.
No. It's like Christians who say to me, we would love you to come to Christ, but you are so valuable to us as a Jew when you defend us Christians. Yeah. And they're right. You are valuable in the best sense of the word.
The third season of the Rubin Report started in September of 2017 with the fittingly titled Season 3 of the Rubin Report Starts Now. No mistakes on timing there. In the direct message, we get more of the usual platitudes Rubin extends to the audience, and another appeal to them for booking suggestions for the new season of the show.
There's a specific issue you want us to cover or a special person you want us to talk to this season, let us know in the comments right down below.
The responses are telling. They range from libertarian poster boy Ron Paul to deluded crackpot poster boy Mark Dice. One of the few genuine voices from the left recommended is YouTuber and Dark Mother disciple ContraPoints, but the reaction by some of the Rubin Report's audience demonstrates how interested they are in voices from the left, with a bit of transphobia thrown in for good measure. But the Rubin Report's audience isn't the only thing moving increasingly to the right. In a direct message covering the NFL players taking a knee, which was a story about protesting police violence against black men, there was much rage amidst conservatives, and it led to Donald Trump instructing owners to fire the players. Free speech defender Dave Rubin defended the players' rights while simultaneously defending the owners' right to fire the players. For a man who has spoken out so extensively about the chilling effect of being called a racist or sexist, his defense of people literally losing their job while exercising their right to free speech is a serious break from his usual fawning over the First Amendment. Looking at the comments, though, it's not the least bit surprising that the Rubin Report's audience shares this sentiment, and it really demonstrates how paper-thin their commitment to free speech actually is. On the week of that Taking the Knee direct message, Rubin's guest was Candace Owens, a commentator who operates under the label Red Pill Black. No extra points for guessing where she came down on the issue of taking the knee. And naturally, the Rubin Report audience was thrilled to hear from her. The last direct message from 2017 I want to mention is from October, and it discusses the Las Vegas shooting. In contrast to the previous direct message, where Rubin very much towed the line with his audience, this one took a slightly different tactic. It's also the fourth least popular direct message on the channel. This direct message includes Rubin bucking the majority of his audience and advocating for gun control. Of course, in the message, he equivocates this by speaking at length about mental health, but to discuss gun control at all is a position the Rubin Report audience have little interest in. The comments are universal in their distaste for gun control, and Rubin's crowdsourcing through the Rubin Report audience for a guest to educate him on gun laws will likely have the obvious effect of pushing Rubin further to the right. This is a microcosm of how the Rubin Report works. It starts with a flimsily held centrist position. Rubin sources guests based on the recommendation from his anti-left crowd. An inevitable conservative comes to educate Rubin and any outliers in the audience on how to think, and everyone nodding along with the channel takes another step to the right. And those right-wing voices make the show a beacon for more right-wing viewers too. The next time Rubin introduces a topic and states his position, it'll be a little further to the right. And the next time his audience suggests or reacts to a guest, there will be more voices from the right making comments. And the cycle continues, all while the channel keeps racking up subs and Patreon keeps racking up dollars. In that theoretical model of how the Rubin Report functions, the political leanings of Dave Rubin is one of the least important variables. This is one thing I think most criticisms of the Rubin Report get wrong, or at least get far too hung up on. Whatever Dave Rubin might call himself doesn't matter as much as the system he oversees. He can be a classical liberal, a secret conservative, or a clueless progressive, and it wouldn't matter. The positions of the Rubin Report guests and its audience are what animate this conveyor belt that moves viewers, and Rubin himself, from the left to the right. It's possible something could disrupt this model, and perhaps an audience can only be pulled so far to the right before they check out or demand more moderate voices, but I'm not sure the Rubin Report has hit that limit just yet. As I write this in early 2018, very little has changed in the land of Rubin. Dave Rubin continues to make increasingly right-wing claims, going so far as to say he would support Donald Trump over Bernie Sanders.
If everything basically stays like it is right now, and my choice in 2020 is either Trump or Bernie or Elizabeth Warren or Gavin Newsom or one of these crazy progressives, I'm voting Trump. And I won't have a problem doing it.
And the audience is still ravenous for conversations between the likes of Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson. And with over 2 million views and 40 times the number of likes to dislikes, there's a clear sign here that the Rubin Report audience has an insatiable hunger for this type of content. Compare that to the recent interview with David Frum, a former speechwriter for George W. Bush, and certainly nobody's progressive, and we see the views drop down to 60,000 for the main interview, and a huge outpouring of dislikes. At this point, the Rubin Report's audience is reliably on the right, if not far right. Whatever labels they wish to champion, when they have warmer reactions for the likes of Stefan Molyneux or Lauren Southern instead of David Frum, this is not traditional conservative politics. While I don't have any real data to accurately measure the political alignment of the Rubin Report audience, here is some spontaneous polling of the audience at a Dave Rubin comedy show to give us a worthless anecdote.
How many of you would say that you're conservatives? By a round of applause. How many conservatives? How many of you are libertarians? Libertarians. All right, we did conservatives, we did libertarians. How many progressives? How many progressives? So we got, not one, is no one will say it? I mean, we're not gonna shoot you. I mean, we have one. Please, take them outside. So we did conservatives, we did libertarians, we did how many classical liberals would be?
Some selection bias is at play here, because anyone going to a Dave Rubin comedy show must really love the guy, or hate themselves. Ultimately, I think Dave Rubin isn't just a supporter of the free marketplace of ideas, he's also a victim. By throwing the reins of his show to the audience and following the money, whatever vision he had of a show that spanned the political spectrum was co-opted by anti-left and conservative voices. The free market was never going to protect Rubin's ideal platform. How could it? As much as we might like to think everyone has a spot in the marketplace, we're limited by the people we can reach and the people who will listen to us. As much as we like to think a strong idea can survive any onslaught, it can never be heard if it's never given a platform. And a platform that refuses to engage with one side of the political spectrum, or at least grows increasingly hostile towards it, will never be a place where ideas can be fairly compared. In an ideal world, the free marketplace of ideas would truly let every idea have a shot at expressing itself, and be presented to a diverse audience capable of making a reasonable consideration of the evidence. But in the world we've got, the ideas that get championed or platformed are often the ones coming from people with resources to make that happen. A libertarian think tank funded by wealthy people can spread its ideas of classical liberalism more easily than a trans activist with a blog. If you claim to be a space where all ideas can be discussed and then deliberately host one side far more than the other on just about every issue, you aren't the free market you pretend to be. You're an opportunist platform fighting for the status quo. I think you know what one of those places is called.